We are now in the midst of a beginning of a new term for the new county government and the county executive. To probably have an opportunity for you to question me or talk to me about some of the ongoing initiatives and challenges that we face in Montgomery County, and to make myself available and to respond to some of the inquiries that you've made over the last few weeks. Let me first start off by acknowledging the very tragic deaths that we had recently in Gaithersburg. The loss of 6 lives is really unfortunate and tragic. I had an opportunity the other night to visit the scene, and a person who's seen a great deal from war and challenges throughout our community, to witness what I had an opportunity to see the other night was really quite moving, and a very difficult time to see that, because while I was there, obviously the plane was still there, and some of the bodies were still inside the plane. It also called into question a number of questions raised by residents within that community about the safety operations at the airport. This is an unusual incident. We will certainly have an opportunity to review the operations at the airport to see whether there is anything that we need to do or lessons to be learned from this incident. But you don't want to take anything for granted. The operations are back into effect at the airport. But we certainly will review and respond to some of the questions and concerns that residents have raised. Traditionally, they've raised questions related to the noise at the airport. The assumption in the working operation with the airport authorities and the federal government has been that it was approved and capable of making all the operations safe and sound for the community. But we will go back and ask for a review and work with the federal authorities to make certain that there are some lessons to be learned. We get those and ensure the greatest safety for the community. Let me start by acknowledging a challenge that we face at the overall level for ongoing budgetary sustainability. You received a briefing just the other day related to some of the challenges that we face in Montgomery County. And I've heard from a number of people who said, well, given the magnitude of the challenges that we've had in the past, that this should not be a real difficulty, a challenge for you to deal with. And although we've closed over close to $3 billion in budgetary gaps, in 1 year alone, it was $975 million. And the amounts of the sums that we're looking at now do not on the surface appear to be that great. It is a difficult challenge, and here's why. When we dealt with these larger challenges in the past, we had more options. And some of the options that we exercised were options that we exercised for the first time. And keep in mind that we eliminated 10% of the entire workforce. We furloughed employees. We eliminated COLAs, cost of living adjustments, and a variety of things across the board. We increased the fuel energy tax. I used virtually every option that was reasonably available for us to exercise. So although the amount is smaller, the challenge is greater because the options in many ways are fewer. And so it presents to us a very difficult challenge to deal with. We will go back, constantly review that, look at it, and hopefully by March have what we believe to be a path forward, but it will not be an easy path. It will require some challenges and adjustments. Let me also pick up just briefly, and then I will stop, with the announcement that I made the other day related to the inauguration. I have been mystified over the last few years for some time about this perception about Montgomery County, about whether we're open for business, why does that perception persist, despite the many things that we've done. If you look at all the major master plans that have been approved in the last few years, there's been a massive amount of pro-business activity on the part of this county. whether you're looking at the White Oak Master Plan, where we literally adjusted our development procedure related to transportation and staging in order to ensure that we move forward, and we did so. The Science Corridor in the Gaithersburg area, a major development project, we've moved forward. All of the changes that we made, and you can look at probably 20 plus adjustments, additions of moving facilities around to accommodate the Shady Grove Smart Growth Initiative, what we are doing in Wheaton and Silver Spring. And if you look at all of those things, that is a very strong pro-business record of accomplishments and changes that we've made over the last few years to enhance growth and development. All of the streamlining that we've adjusted and made, so forth. So there have been an awful lot of things that we've done over the last few years to show that we are really prepared and ready to work with the business community and to demonstrate and to let them know that we are really in a position to be positive about their development projects going forward. But that myth, that perception is out there, so we have to deal with it as though it's reality. And so in addition to the things that we've outlined here, I want people to understand there have been an awful lot of things that we've done over the last few years. And those oftentimes are not recognized. The challenge for us going forward will continue to be financial. I'm meeting tomorrow with Governor-elect Hogan to follow up on a couple of earlier conversations that we've had about his future plans for the state and Montgomery County. Yesterday I was asked a question on the local television about the ongoing working relationship with the incoming governor. We've had an election. The voters of the state of Maryland have decided who they want as governor. My task is to work with the governor to assume that we are going to have a very positive, strong working relationship to ensure that growth and development continues not only in Montgomery County, throughout the state. And I presume and believe that we will be able to work together. And that is what I'm encouraging all people. That's the assumption that we make. That is my belief. And so we will talk probably a little bit more in details about some of the challenges facing the state and how we can work together. But I am optimistic that the challenges that we see will be things that we can work together on. You had copies, I think, of the 6-point plan that we've outlined. And this is just, as I indicated the other day, the things that we've identified thus far that we want to do. There are some additional ideas we want to follow up on as we go forward. So with that, I'm going to stop, and if there are any questions you want to raise at this point in time. Oh, and also we've made some announcements, as you recall, on filling a few appointments. We got a few more to fill, and we're working to do those as aggressively as possible.
What policies in particular are you going to look at the airport?
Well, the biggest one that citizens have raised is the proximity question, the approaches to landing and takeoff. The one that has been there for a long period of time, of course, the noise. And so we're going to look at all of those things. We're going to wait until, we're not going to wait until we get the final report from the federal authorities as it relates to the particular incident. But when you have an incident of this magnitude, I think it's appropriate to make certain that we go back to examine cause, effect, and to make sure that we're doing everything that we conceivably do to ensure public safety there.
Are you actually tasking somebody to look at this and come back to you with recommendations? I mean, how formal a review is this?
Well, we're going to go back to the Revenue Authority, first of all, and ask for their review. And based on their review, we may go much further beyond that, but we've asked them to go back and look at the operations. And they, of course, will do that. And I think there's some requirement from the federal authorities that will do that in any event. And so hopefully we'll be able to pull those two together and determine from that point whether we need to go much further beyond that. But the things that will be covered, obviously, will be the things that most often come to mind from citizens. The proximity takeoff, direction, the number of flights, the time of the flights. There are some things that may or may not be necessary to accomplish from an infrastructure standpoint of view that needs to be reviewed as well.
Can you talk about, you said you had a few conversations with the governor-elect. Can you talk about what you talked about in this conversation?
There's just basically general congratulatory conversations, generally looking at the challenges that we face, our need to work together and put in behind the election and moving forward. Those sort of general conversations we've had thus far. We talked about the recent trip that I had. At that time, I was about to leave to go to India, and opportunities that we see going forward, not only for Montgomery County, but for the state as well. The follow-up conversation would be more detailed about, okay, here are some of the things that we are precisely doing in Montgomery County. Here's our plan for going forward. Generally, how do these things fit within your plan and what it is we need to do together to move the county and the state forward.
Do you, how prominent is the purple line going to be in this? This is a sit-down, face-to-face, right?
Right.
This is the first sit-down, or have you done other?
We've talked before on the telephone and
On the
just
telephone.
briefly. Yeah.
How prominent is the purple line going to be in your message to him, or is it going to be one of 3 or 4 sort of important things that you want to talk to him about?
It'll be one of 3 or 4 things we would talk about, and certainly we'll be part of it. Obviously, when you have a project of this magnitude and such swirling discussion and about it, it will certainly be a topic of this discussion. But keep in mind that there are other projects that we have as well. Bus rapid transit, we have the Carter City Transit as well, and overall highway user funds, which the state has pulled back on over the last few years. All of those things are part of the discussion. But I want to phrase it, I want to put this in a larger context. That is the understanding and appreciation for how transportation, especially transit, fits into overall growth, development, quality of life issues here in Montgomery County, how that benefits Montgomery County, how that benefits the state of Maryland, and how that fits into his overall plan for job growth and continuation of that growth. You can't do that unless you're able to deal with the challenges of transportation. And the most effective place in which to deal with that in terms of broad growth, the numbers, Montgomery County is the economic engine of the state of Maryland. And so if you want to advance the agenda that he wants to advance, then I think you have to look very seriously at what we're doing here locally. And that's the message that I want to convey.
It seems like a general message. Do you envision saying to him that to scrap the purple line would be a?
Oh yes. Now I'm going to defend. I'm going to
defend
defend very clearly our master plan in transportation, and that starts. The purple line is at the top of that.
Do you expect the private sector to take more of the lead in getting him the message about the purple line? Is that?
Yeah, you know, and I guess the advocates on both sides have started already to weigh in and given sometimes conflicting advice about what should be done. So he's heard probably from this region more about the purple line than probably any other transportation project that I can imagine, given that it was a center of discussion during the campaign and an ongoing center of discussion, and is a project that is right before, right at a decision point, I would say.
The congressional bill that they're passing right now has money for the red line in Baltimore. The purple line, how does it, if you look at, you know, who they benefit or how many people would be affected by it, how did the purple line, I guess, fall behind that in the red line and getting money?
That's a good question. And we're trying to figure it out ourselves. And so I don't understand the politics of the Hill in terms of how they arrived at those decisions, but I think those decisions are probably made more in the political context of the budget than the substance and the reality of what the various projects provide.
Let me phrase it differently. I guess would say a lot of people, I think yourself included, would say that when it comes to, you know, the state government and all that, that more seems to go to Baltimore than comes to Montgomery County. So is this just an example of that?
No, I think there's a mixed message on that. Certainly, I think you can make a case in certain areas that there's more. But when you look at construction overall, and you weigh all dollars, school, highway, you go to places like Anne Arundel County, Howard County, and you lay out to them the needs of Montgomery County, the first thing that they would say, we have no ICC, we have no Metro, we have none of those things, and those things are not weighed. And they make a very strong case about how you balance all of those things. And so I think sometimes we get caught up in the political rhetoric that there's this huge imbalance. There is an imbalance, but that gap is not as wide as people have portrayed it to be once you look at all projects. You can make a case here or there maybe for schools on one side, but when you look at transportation and other kinds of things, there's a very strong case that others make about their need for some of the projects. And this is what you hear oftentimes from some of the rural communities. And I hear that quite often. I serve as a very prominent member of the as a board of directors of MACO. In fact, I will be the incoming president of MACO. And so these arguments that I hear, when you listen to officials around the state, are not as clear-cut as we make them here in this particular region. It's much closer than people realize.
For the Silver Spring Transit Center, I've still heard doubts from a number of community groups about if we will actually be able to recover this taxpayer money. Could you just comment on your outlook on that?
Well, I stated at the beginning that we plan to hold those accountable who we think of the flaws and challenges associated with the center. We move forward with what I call an advancement, and I indicated that going back some months ago, that we would advance the additional monies to get the center in the position that we think that it should be in going forward, that we will seek the appropriate legal action to recover that. Now, if someone is saying there's a process to get to that and there's some time, you always have some risk, certainly there is, but I think we have a very strong case for the problems associated with the center and the fault and responsibilities for that. And we intend to pursue every legal option available for us to recover the monies from the citizens of Montgomery County.
To what extent have you been using, and I haven't looked at the contracts, but are you using Folger Pratt and Parsons Brinkerhoff for new work at this point?
Folger Pratt is, very much involved in the work, yeah. And as of the record, Parsons is still the engineer of record.
They still are the engineers.
Yeah.
Not for new work.
Yeah.
But Folger is into new projects?
Yeah.
Which ones?
Folger has not been awarded any new.
New contract.
Is that a matter of they're not being considered? Does the transit center end into that calculus, or are they players? Are they able to compete and they just didn't get the work?
They have not submitted on any of our jobs.
Yeah.
Is there any update on when it may open? I think the last update was the work could be done by the end of the year.
Yeah, the way it looks now, we will complete the struts and beams through the winter, meaning December, January, February, with anticipation completion of that in early March. Then there's the LMC work, which is the latex, that takes about 3 to 4 weeks, as I understand it. Has to wait until the weather is warm, which has happened, say, March or April. Once they've done with that, we're through. And we turn it over to Metro. They then have 60 days to complete their inspections for opening. So if you look at that from the most optimistic viewpoint, it would probably be late spring before we are completed with that, and sometime in that time frame for Metro to make a decision about opening. But the path forward is very clear. We have before the council now the revenues completed. We have a time frame. We have an agreement as to when that it should be done, and a path forward for how that goes about. And so it's very clear. And if you look at the memo that we sent to the council, we indicated very clear dates when we anticipate the work to be done.
One reaction just on that point too that I heard from the Montgomery County Taxpayers League was that they suggested a sort of post-mortem review of how the contracts work so that in the future we can take a look at how much responsibility the county shares if something like this were to happen again. Do you feel any need to
Well,
review?
we've had reviews thus far. This project will review more than the recent review from the discussion that the Senate is looking at on torture in the U.S. Senate now. This will be a highly, highly reviewed project. But let me also say this about the project that people have to keep in mind. This is not like building a school or a typical road or bridge, which you do every year. And you're doing 3 and 4 of these, and therefore the lessons to be learned to apply to that are immediate and clear. This is probably one of the first projects of this type along the entire East Coast in a number of years. This is not like something that you go out and say, okay, we learned how to build transit centers, and we're going to build one next year. And we have this model that we can go back and follow. I don't anticipate in my lifetime that we ever see one of these things. And so it's not like, okay, we got this model down for transit centers, and we've learned the lesson, we go pull it off the shelves and use it every other year or something. This is not likely to happen anytime soon. So you have to be careful about spending too much time on the lesson learned. For a transit project, there are probably some lessons to be learned about accountability, responsibility, and management that we would always go back and review, but this is not like a repeat performance of something that would happen and be utilized repeatedly. No.
Can we get your reaction to the resignation of Steve Silverman, and was he involved in your 6-point economic plan?
Oh yes, very much involved. As you may recall, Steve and I have had an ongoing, very close relationship for many years. Prior to the time that he actually served on the council, while we both served together as members of the county council, while we both ran against each other for county executive, and while he served in my administration, we remained friends throughout that, and we will continue even after he's left. He's been a valuable part of not only what we've accomplished in the past, but in developing the strategy moving forward. He has, at this point in time, decided that there's some other things that he would like to do. He's served this administration and this county very, very well, and this was a decision that he made, and we are fortunate to have him, especially under these very difficult times, to be a part of this administration. And I wish him well in any future endeavors.
With his departure, do you see the role of the department changing, and will the NBDC have a bigger role?
I don't just significantly see that it would change that drastically. Obviously, we always go back and review other models and approaches. If you go back and look at, I think it was a report that was presented some months ago when we were looking at various approaches, and I was open for different ideas about how to approach this. My view was, let's do what is most effective in the interest of Montgomery County. I was not wedded to any particular model. But the report indicated that the models are not that significant, that you could take the traditional models that many jurisdictions follow, or a combination, or a separate entity model. It is the responsibilities, the management, the leadership, and the resources that you have in any model. So the emphasis is on how much money you're devoting to economic development, what are the marketing schemes that you have, how many people that you have in, how it is prioritized within government, city, county, or state. Whichever model you have, you can accomplish that under any scenario. So it's not the model, it's the resources and the functions that are performed therein.
What's the status of your talks with the contract talks with the labor unions at this point? Are they ongoing?
They're just at this point early stage. They are basically making the rounds and getting information. We have not started in honesty the actual formal talks, as I recall, at this point. But we've had some, at least I've had some general conversation with some of the union leadership about some of the challenges they see, generally about some of the things that they would like to accomplish or like to see us accomplish in the negotiations. But all of that has to be taken in the context of the overall budget, the financial challenges we face, our priorities going forward. But also you have to take into consideration the history of the last few years. What we've done or have not done is part of that equation. What is the county's sustainability going forward in terms of our resources to provide the kinds of things that the union wants. And obviously, when you start off, there's always, I've never seen it work thus far any other differently. There's always a big gap between the aspirations of the unions and what they believe they should get versus the realities that we see from the perspective of county government resources.
Is your expectation that you won't end up with quite as big a package as they had those first 2 years, the 2-year period that's ending now?
I'm not going to comment on the specifics or details of this other than to say that I want to treat them fairly. I want to deal with this in a respectful manner, and we will negotiate at the time that we negotiate. But we have to do so in light of the financial conditions that we see now and are likely to see in the future. And I want to be as fair, as open, as transparent with them about this. We've had ongoing discussions about it, and sometimes they've gotten to be quite testy, and sometimes they've been remarkably civil. But we'll work somewhere between those two ranks.
Are your concerns about arbitration the same that they were last time around, that you have to sort of position yourself so that this thing wouldn't go to arbitration, or to avoid arbitration, or is that still all hanging over your head?
Well, I'm always going to position myself to do what I think is in the best interest of Montgomery County.
Okay.
I had a question. I know you spoke at a march in relation to Ferguson and Eric Garner events. I was wondering if you could talk about a couple of the interactions you've had where you maybe felt racially profiled in a sense, and
I guess you heard about that, huh?
I heard a little bit, yeah. And also what lessons we can take from this as a local jurisdiction in terms of race relations and police treatment.
Yeah, let me back up by saying that I found, especially in the Garner case, the incident and the failure to get an indictment just baffling to me. As a law school professor and someone who's looked at what goes on in the grand jury room and the power that a prosecutor has, you can almost indict a ham sandwich if you wanted to. It's not a high burden. And it's hard to imagine that could not or should not have occurred in this incident. And I'm baffled to find justifications or reason why that did not occur. And hopefully we'll get some additional information from the grand jury testimony. I'd also say that on one hand, we have the challenges related, and I think it's wrong to paint all police in this negative light. We have, in my view, incidents and individual police who have acted inconsistent with what I think is acceptable behavior. And we need to deal with that, not to indict all police across the board. The police here, the leadership, the men and women in Montgomery County, I think do an outstanding job. And I think they are a model for how you deal in a very diverse community. But there are challenges out there, and I think the best way of dealing with those challenges is to hold people accountable. But when you do have incidents that are the ones that we've seen most recently, we hold people accountable. And that's the best way, because it shows respect for the law. It connects people to that level of accountability because they see it, therefore they're much more respectful of the police and how we operate. And the police become aware that if they do things that are inconsistent with the law, that they will be held accountable and punished. And that's where I think we fail. And we fail to hold people accountable. And that, to me, is a colossal failure. Now, I also indicated in the discussion the other day that Montgomery County is a community that I think in many ways is a model and exception to other communities. But we're not perfect. And if we find people who have done things that are wrong, I'm confident that our police department will hold them accountable. And that the challenges associated with race have not been totally eliminated. we didn't get into this challenge overnight as it relates to race relationships, and we're not going to solve it overnight. We've made significant improvement. The fact that I'm here now for the third time as county executive, I think demonstrates that. And not only that it's the third time as county executive, but the seventh time that I've won elections in Montgomery County at large. We've come from a time in Montgomery County in the mid-'80s when I ran for county council that I was fearful to even put my photograph on the brochure that we circulated about my candidacy. To essentially 20 years after that I was elected to the highest office in the county. So there is improvement, and I'm a clear demonstration of that. But there's also problems, and I think I mentioned that the other night, and I gave two incidents. Some years ago, when I had a rental property in Silver Spring, and I was trying to collect rent from my tenant who's been negligent in paying his rent for a couple of months. I decided to go by to visit him. I could never catch him at home and say, when are you going to pay my rent? And so I decided to go by one night, probably 9:30 at night rather than early evening. And so I pulled up to the driveway, and there was no light at the house. And so I drove back out of the driveway. So I just pulled up, drove back. And then I drove down the street, and I was going to circle the block and come back to make sure no one was at the house. So as I did so, and I was coming back, Montgomery County Police stopped me. And immediately when I turned and the police officers saw me, I was on the county council at the time. He said, "Oh, Mr. Leggett, I just wanted to stop you to say hello." Well, if you believe that, then that's what happened. And then most recently, during the campaign, I have this ritual where I go out for every election and I place my sign on 20 precincts. I have a route to follow. I know I want to put the signs at, and I've done that for 7 consecutive elections. And sometimes some volunteers may go there and place a sign before I arrive. I would literally take that sign down and take my sign down that they put up and put my sign at the location I want. I'm just that, I follow that ritual just that way. So this time, I guess it was about 10:30 at night, I drove up to the Good Hope Recreation Center on Good Hope Road. And I had on a sweater, a baseball cap, and I think I was wearing jeans. And I got out of the car to put my sign at the polling station. Park police drives up, jumps out, starts yelling at me. "What are you doing here? You can't come here," and screaming and yelling at the top of his voice about why I was there. And I said, "I'm here to put this sign up. You can't do this, that, and the other. You have no business being here," in a very derogatory manner. And I guess his partner, who's a female, looked and noticed the name on the sign and took a careful look at me and said, "Oh, we are sorry. He didn't mean anything. He didn't know who you were. He's from Howard County, by the way." So, my point is that I have witnessed what I consider to be behavior that was not respectful. In that, especially in that latter incident. And so, if that can happen to me as county executive, then what do you think of the images of a young teenager who may not be as mature and react differently to that kind of conduct, and is confused and frightened? And this is why, as I said before, things have improved, but there are still some challenges and difficulties that we have for us.
Do you still own any rental property?
No, no,
No.
my daughter now owns the house.
How long ago was this, the
The
incident?
the incident was just a couple of weeks ago.
No, with the rental property.
Oh, this goes back, it's probably, I was on the county council, it was the late 90s.
Late 90s?
Yeah.
What neighborhood was the property in? What neighborhood were you in?
It's in the Good Hope, it's in the, yeah, Briggs Cheney Road off of in Silver Spring.
Briggs Cheney.
Yeah.
Do you think that, or have you had any discussions with the police about body cameras?
Yes, in fact, we are looking at that. The chief is reviewing that, and I think the approach that we're going to take, he's going to look at introducing them, I think, with the recruit class and use them through the training process and gradually move the process forward so that we would eventually have them throughout the department. Now, there are some things we have to do. I think there's some question related to the law in the state of Maryland related to that, evidence gathering, those kinds of things that need some clarification on the cost of it. But we are committed to moving forward, and of course you have to deal with ongoing union discussions about how you formally do that. But we can do it right now with the training class as a model for how we may eventually want to move forward.
This is something that you would have to be collectively bargained with the existing force?
That's what's, I don't think so, but, the other side believes that you should,
And is this something that you approached Chief Manger with? You thought this would be something that...
I approached him and he was already there. I came to him and said, okay, I was coming to you with what I wanted to lay out the plan, and so we sort of came to the same conclusion.
This
at the
was
same
recently?
time.
You had this
Yeah,
conversation?
this is about 8 months ago, 7, 8 months ago. About 7 months, 6 months ago.
6 months ago?
Mm.
Okay. So this predates...
No, I'm sorry. When would we have the first case? The Ferguson?
Ferguson? Well...
Right around the beginning of the Ferguson case.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions?
I just wanted to go back to the plane crash. There's been a fund established for the family, over $300,000, according to the website. I just checked it as I was sitting here. What does that tell you about this community that you're the county executive of?
Well, first of all, it demonstrates that people are really touched and saddened by what has occurred, that they know that this was a very young family, and any tragedy of this magnitude, there's help and support that families need. And without the family literally reaching out and asking for help, the community is stepping forward. So it says a great deal about our community, our sorrow, and our commitment to look out for our fellow residents in and around the community. And I'm really, really moved by the fact that people have moved so quickly to do so in such a generous way. This is a tragedy, and I think the people in the region, not only in Montgomery County, but throughout the region, are responding in an overwhelming positive way. And I'm really gratified to see this happen. Okay, thank you.